What's up, peeps? Welcome to another edition of Hip Hop Head R&B Legends. This is my second one. This one's going to be for an innovative artist in the world of R&B music, Donny Hathaway. As I said, with Marvin Gaye, I do want to expand and talk about other aspects of music. So I'm just going to talk about like R&B legends. I'm not going to review R&B albums, but I'm going to review R&B legends because I believe that R&B did play a role in hip hop's creation, and also plays a part in hip hop now today as far as production goes. 'Cause a lot of people tend to use old R&B samples in their production, and in the creation of in the beat making process. So I'm going to talk about R&B legends as well. So today it's going to be Donny Hathaway. Donny Hathaway died in 1979, suicide. His death's ruled as suicide. I don't know anything else about his death. I don't know any of the facts. Just know that his death is ruled as suicide. Pretty much, Donny Hathaway seemed to be one of those artists that was similar to the rock and roll artists from the late 50s, early 60s. The rock and roll artists that would hum together their own albums, and they would have a lot of instrumentation and would display instrumentation throughout the album. Donny Hathaway was one of those artists that that displayed his talent for music and his ear for music. His first album was released in 1970, Everything Is Everything. He wrote 5 of the 9 tracks on the album, and you could. I guess he dealt with schizophrenia, and the first song, and it was a coincidence that his first song was called "I Hear Voices" or "Voices Inside." I believe it was called "Everything Is Everything," and that's the way that he began his solo career. It was a song called "Voices Inside," and pretty much it was. I like that album the best out of all of his albums, to be honest with you. I just like the kind of the gritty sound, the gritty soulful R&B sound that he had possessed on this record. And and also he did well with cover songs. He didn't just use his own music. He just, he would use other artists' music, but he would make other songs his own. And also the people in the background. He had Cornell Dupree, King Curtis, legendary saxophonist, and I believe Cissy Houston, Whitney Houston's mother, was a background singer for Donny Hathaway. But he put together people that he knew can do the job and pretty much create a sound for his album that he wanted, and that's what he got with Everything Is Everything. He created a sound. He created a sound that was just very soulful and gritty. He didn't have the honesty of a Marvin Gaye. He didn't have the, he had more so a soulful approach like a Curtis Mayfield. He wasn't, he didn't really try to accommodate, his voice like a Isaac Hayes, who pretty much, I think, and this is only my opinion, I personally believe that Isaac Hayes possibly struggled on some of his songs. If you hear songs like "Come Live With Me," you can kind of hear he struggled a little bit. But you hear Donny Hathaway song, and he sounds like an artist that was just perfectionist, and everything had to be perfect, and everything was on cue, and Everything Is Everything was just the perfect album to begin his career. Everything just seemed to be perfect on that album. That's all I could really say about it. It was flawless. The production, instrumentation. He had the perfect background singers to complement his sound. It was just a perfect debut album for R&B, out of R&B albums. And the ending, before To Be Young, Gifted, and Black, which was a Nina Simone cover, the last original song that he did was The Ghetto. The Ghetto was, which was recreated by Too Short, which he made a rap song by. The Ghetto, I think, is probably one of the greatest R&B productions and songs ever written. I just think it was and and also was I believe one of the darkest as well. So we go on to 1971, the self-titled Donny Hathaway album. And it was a cover album. Cover albums tend to be 50-50, whether some people just tend to really like them or some people just tend to not like them. Donny Hathaway, the self-titled album, was actually good. I thought it was good. I think that he brought his own identity to all these songs. Like he used a Glass Night and Pips song, songs like "Giving Up" and "A Song for You." Put your hand in the hand. These songs, he just made them his own. And I think when we turn around and we critique cover albums, we compare them to the original songs, and instead of which is kind of the identity crisis with cover albums. You get this sort of identity crisis where people are like, well, I like the original song much better than I like this version of the song. You see it a lot these days. And Donny Hathaway, I think, just took all these songs and made them his own. And it's another flawless album. And, second album, cover album, another flawless album. He had, the usual suspects on it. And it was actually, I believe it was one of the last albums that King Curtis had worked on before he was stabbed to death in August of '71. And then the live album. The live album is one of the best live albums ever made. If you hadn't heard the live album from Donny Hathaway, you have to hear it. Has some really good covers. He covered "What's Going On" by Marvin Gaye. "The Ghetto" was probably one of the best songs on was probably one of the best live songs on there. The live album was great. You get a feel of being in a Donny Hathaway concert, listening to the live album. So let's go on to his last album, "Extensions of a Man." This was a little bit different than the other albums. The other albums, he had more soulful people on the first two albums. This album didn't have Cissy Houston singing background. He didn't have his usual background singers. This time he depended on more of a jazz sound. He got more jazz artists on this one than he did for the other two albums. The only person that he did keep was he kept Cornell Dupree. He was basically the only person he kept. He Phil Upchurch, I believe his name was Phil Upchurch, was still working with him. Who worked on the first album. And he got a young Stanley Clarke. Who's probably one of the better jazz guitar artists out there. I believe he's a bass guitar. But overall, "Extension of a Man" was his last album, released 6 years before his death, and the song that we're all gonna remember on this album is always going to be "Someday We'll All Be Free." "Someday We'll All Be Free" is pretty much that song. I guess it was that pivotal, seminal moment in Hathaway's career, to where we remember "Song for You," "The Ghetto," and many other in this Christmas, the seasonal song. But "Someday We'll All Be Free," I think, just seems to be somewhat of a signature record for him, and would have been a signature song for him if he continued to live, because I think just because of how he sung it, just because of how he sung the song. But "Extensions of a Man" was how he ended his solo career, because he went on, he made songs with Roberta Flack, "Closer I Get to You," "You Are My Heaven," songs of that nature. And basically, he died in 1979. They say that we remember things best in threes. And Hathaway only released 3 albums. And pretty much in this case, he only needed 3 albums to show off his talent as an R&B artist, as a singer, as a musician, as a producer. And pretty much, he's an artist that we should never forget. Donny Hathaway is probably one of the greater, most talented singers of this last generation before ours. So please join me next time for our Baby Huey, Hip Hop Head, and I'm out.